In this episode, we're heading to the Zoo Parc de Beauval in France to check out its showstopper, the Equatorial Dome. But hey, before we dive in, let me gossip a little about the zoo itself. So, this zoo is often called the fourth most beautiful zoo in the world. Fourth? Really? I mean, from what I've seen, it might actually be the prettiest zoo I've ever been to. Like, seriously stunning. Size-wise, it's about on par with Prague Zoo, around 45 hectares and 800 species. Each has its own claim to fame. Prague's got shoebills and pangolins, while Beauval's rocking giant pandas and manatees. Pretty cool trade-off, right? Now, the only tiny hiccup? Getting there. This isn't Berlin or Prague, where public transport basically holds your hand. Nope, Beauval's a bit out of the way. From Paris, it's still a journey, and if you're not driving, you'll want to plan ahead. Otherwise, instead of watching animals, you'll just be testing your patience with French transportation. Beauval Zoo is split into 22 different zones, but the one that totally blew my mind is this, the Equatorial Dome. Picture this, a massive glass half-sphere, about 100 meters wide and 38 meters tall, with a full hectare of space inside. It's home to around 200 animal species and literally tens of thousands of tropical plants. Basically, it's like they picked up the equator and dropped it right in the middle of France. Opened in February 2020, it's still the zoo's ultimate showstopper. The temperature in here? Always a comfy 26 degrees Celsius. For the animals, it's the perfect climate. And for primates like me, even better. Tropical vibes without the sweaty mess. The way the tour is laid out is super fun, too. You kind of walk the equator, starting in the Americas, then moving on to Africa, Southeast Asia. One loop feels like a mini world trip. Personally, I think South America steals the show with its lineup. And if you follow the spiral walkway upwards, you can get a bird's eye view of the whole tropical jungle-like scene. Alright, enough talk. Let's jump in and explore the dazzling Equatorial Dome together. Not long after you enter the dome, you'll bump into its biggest celebrity, the West Indian manatee. My very first memory of manatees goes way back to when I was a kid. I once heard this quirky story. Somewhere in the US, people wanted to bring in manatees as eco-friendly lawnmowers to deal with invasive plants in local rivers. Sounds wild, right? Turns out, when I looked it up for this video, that wasn't just a rumor. Back in the 1970s, Florida actually did run an experiment like that. The idea must have come after researchers watched how manatees eat, because these guys are basically eating machines. They're the largest plant eaters in the water, chomping down dozens of kilos of greens every single day. Put them in a supermarket and, well, the veggie aisle would be empty by sunset. Beauval has spent over 20 years building up a whole family of manatees, and today it's home to the largest group in Europe. Visitors get to watch them from different angles, even from the second floor, where you can see them rising to the surface to breathe. Manatees are pretty special. They belong to the order Sirenia, named after the sirens in Greek mythology. But here's the funny part. Early sailors, after way too long at sea without seeing any women, apparently mistook these slow, chubby creatures for beautiful mermaids. Even Columbus himself wrote that the mermaids he saw weren't quite as pretty as expected. Talk about the world's first catfishing moment. So scientists leaned into the myth and called them Sirenia. In reality, though, these so-called mermaids just want to chill and munch on water plants all day. And here's a fun fact. Manatees are actually close relatives of elephants. They're part of the same evolutionary branch. Some people even joke that manatees are basically elephants who decided to go full aquatic edition. Right next to the manatees is the home of the giant otters. And honestly, the contrast between these neighbors couldn't be bigger. Manatees are slow, quiet, and stick to plants, while giant otters are fast, loud, playful, and born hunters. The giant otters are actually the longest members of the weasel family. Native to northern and central South America, they're mostly found in the Amazon River and its banks, as well as the Pantanal wetlands. In Brazil, they're called ariranja, which literally means water jaguar. Pretty epic nickname. Now, full disclosure, I'm terrible at filming otters. And of course, as usual, they didn't really give me a good shot this time either. So let's move on and check out some other animals. Here we've got a white alligator, an albino American alligator to be exact. Check out the red ring around its eyes. Nope, that's not eyeshadow. That's just blood vessels showing through. Albino gators are super rare, whether in the wild or in zoos. They're basically the unicorns of the alligator world. Next door, I spotted a school of red-bellied piranhas and a Cuvier's dwarf caiman. Think of it as a fun-sized crocodile. Adults barely reach just over a meter long. Both of these species are pretty common in zoos, but still cool to see up close. Next up, let's check out the pygmy hippos. Funny thing, there are so many fish in their pool that I started wondering if the zookeepers just dumped a bunch of aquarium tanks in there. Luckily, pygmy hippos are strict vegetarians, so the fish are totally safe. As long as they move out of the way when the hippos go for a swim, it's all good. There are two pygmy hippos here, a female named Luna and a male named Robert. As for which one I caught on camera, I have no idea. They look the same to me. And since pygmy hippos are mostly nocturnal, they usually spend the day napping. So the fact that one actually showed up in broad daylight and let me film it, I feel pretty lucky. Now we're heading into a walkthrough exhibit. At first, I thought it was just a regular open aviary, because right above me on the branches, I spotted a pair of von der Decken's hornbills. But then I tilted my head back a bit more and realized the ceiling was full of Rodriguez flying foxes hanging upside down. These fruit bats are found only on the tiny island of Rodriguez in the Indian Ocean, and they're now endangered. In the wild, there are probably only about 20,000 adults left. On the ground here, you'll also find Aldabra giant tortoises. So in the same space, you've got bats in the sky, hornbills in the treetops, and tortoises on the ground. It's such a clever use of vertical space, safe and comfy for the animals, and for visitors, it feels like stepping into a little multi-layered ecosystem. Totally a win-win. This might just be the most stunning and colorful monkey in the world, the red-shanked Dao. Its face is a bright orange. The chin and neck are white, and then the chest turns a reddish orange, almost like it's wearing a fancy necklace. Most of its body fur is gray-brown, but those deep red legs really stand out. That's where the red-shanked name comes from. These elegant monkeys are super rare in Europe. In Asia, they're a bit more common, since that's their natural range. I've heard that in the past, they didn't adapt well to zoos because of their very specific diet. But nowadays, it seems zoos have figured out their menu. They're listed as critically endangered by the IUCN, though no one's quite sure how many are left in the wild. Here in the tropical dome, the high ceilings give them plenty of vertical space to bounce around, almost like the tall forests they come from. The only problem? The fine mesh around their enclosure made filming a bit tricky. Remember the gharials I filmed in my last video? That super long snout really stuck in my mind. Well, here in the tropical dome I ran into its cousins, the Malayan gharial, also known as the false gharial. Compared to the true gharial, its snout is noticeably shorter, and the nickname false gharial has a funny backstory. It was named about decades later than the gharial, and when scholars first studied it, they basically went, looks like a gharial, but not quite the same. So they slapped on the label, false. But here's the twist. Later research showed that they're actually close relatives, both in the same family. So really, there's nothing false about it at all. Just a little naming mishap from back in the day. Alright, that's a wrap on the animals I most wanted to share with you from inside the Equatorial Dome. Of course, there are plenty more residents here, like the smooth-fronted caiman, green anaconda, or the Bourre's box turtle. I only managed to grab a few scattered shots of them. After all, the dome is said to house around 200 species. Even if I filmed for days and nights, I'd never be able to cover everything. And honestly, instead of cramming them all into one video, I'd rather leave a little space for imagination, for you and for myself. That way, the next time I come back, I'll have the perfect excuse to say, "See, there's always something new waiting here."